So, Laura, we're going to look at some myth busting because this is the bit that, depending on who's going to lead on your request for a statutory assessment, whether and who you're talking to, I think it's very important that you know what is true and what is not, and the process. So, Laura, you're going to talk
I
through
am.
the slides.
Yeah, so thank you, Lynn. That's really helpful. I think the bit about timescales was particularly important. And when the local authorities say you've got 15 days to respond, they really mean you've got 15 days to respond. If you're really struggling with it, you can ask for an extension, but on the whole, they like you to do things pretty quickly. The other side of that is actually, whilst there are these statutory timescales where they have to, I think it's 20 weeks from when you first apply for a statutory assessment to actually an EHCP issued, if they're going to issue one. I've got this great, I'm looking at it on my phone because I can't do both at the same time because I'm actually sharing the screen for this. There's a really great local authority hall of shame in terms of which local authorities were least likely to meet the education healthcare plan deadline. And actually, the national average is 50%. So only 50% of local authorities will meet that 20-week deadline. Now, you might be really lucky and be in one of those local authorities, and I hope you are. You may be unlucky and be in one of the local authorities which isn't. I mean, I don't know if we've got anyone here from Essex, but they only meet the 20-week deadline on less than 1% of their applications. I have the joy of I live in Devon, and we come in to our depressing 9th place, which is 4.9% of these meet their timescales. And there's also lots of really interesting stats. There's a very good Facebook page, and there's also a website called Special Needs Jungle. And if you want to just kind of get an overview of what's going on, so it's not just you and your child with a visual impairment, but it actually affects children with all disabilities. Things are quite difficult. And because things are difficult with local authorities, I just wanted to go through a few myths. These are myths, I feel quite depressed saying this, but these haven't really changed in the last kind of 10 years. My daughter's 25, and when she was 14, we simultaneously had a disability discrimination tribunal going on with the school and a SEND tribunal going on with the local authority for her placement for where she was going to go after that, because things weren't going very well at school. And I think if somebody said to me that it was not going to be any better after 10 years, I think I'd have gone and buried my head in the sand rather than carried on doing this job. But there you go, I'm still here. So I think this is a really important myth to bust, which is the school is responsible for requesting a statutory assessment for an EHCP. It's not. You yourself or a child who's 16 or between 16 and 25 can request that the local authority carry out this assessment. And a request can also be made by a doctor, a health visitor, a teacher, a SENCO, and a family friend. Now, we're presuming the teacher and SENCO will be at the school and they would therefore be in agreement. But actually, anybody really who knows your child well can request an EHCP assessment. And what we often find is the most common thing I hear is families who say to me, well, we didn't apply. We know we can apply, but we didn't apply because the school said he or she won't get one. Actually, they may get one, they may not get one. There's a very high chance that they will get the actual assessment eventually. You may have to, take it to appeal and mediation. And when we're doing 3 of these evenings, and the second evening is being done by a colleague of Sophie's, of Lynn's, and she's going to go through the real kind of details of what should be in an EHCP. And the last session that I'm going to be doing, we're going to be looking at the real the nitty-gritty of what to do when they say no. And more local authorities are saying no, even when a child clearly meets the legal test for assessment. So we've been referring children for EHCPs to have a really significant level of vision loss and other disabilities, and they say no. The rates of that being overturned at appeal is something like 98%. It's incredibly high. So I always say to families, don't give up, never give up. Just go into it, be prepared that you probably will have to go to appeal and mediation, and you've got a 98% chance of getting it. So that's one really important factor. Don't be put off by the school saying they won't get one. They often, as Sophie said, don't want you to have one because though people think, you may think that even though your child once they've got an HCP, that will give more money to the school. It very often doesn't. It often means that the school have to spend more of their existing money on your child. And it's not that they don't want to, because that sounds quite harsh on the school. They often are so underfunded that they are very stretched, as are local authorities, as we know. So it's almost like everyone's trying to claw back the money, even if the child legally deserves the support. So I hate to say, you have to fight for your child, because that's all you can do. This is another myth. The school must agree with your views that your child might need an EHCP. They could completely disagree with you. But if you apply for the EHCP, then they have to provide further information that the local authority request. You know your child best. You know that they may present quite differently in school than how they present at home. And the challenge, some children, as I'm sure many of you know, they sit in school, they can't really see what's going on, they don't understand what's going on, but they become very quiet. I mean, of course, some of them don't. Some of them behave because they're so upset and bored that they behave quite badly. But some children will go the other way and they'll be very quiet and very good and get lovely reports about what a good child they are, but actually they're not learning because they can't see anything. And you all know that. You know your child better than the school. So even if your school say, absolutely, they don't need one. If you feel they do, you can still apply, and the school will have to then adhere to what's asked of them. So don't be put off by a school disagreeing with you. This is what I was just saying about the money. You often hear this: a statutory assessment cannot be requested if the child has not exceeded their £6,000 of allocated SEND support. There's this kind of myth that actually children have to. Your child has to need more than £6,000 worth of support that the school has to get an EHCP. Absolutely not. Your school will have a block of money to spend on all of its children with disabilities. And the only thing that should determine whether or not your child needs an EHCP, it's not how much money it costs, how much money it's going to cost the school. It's just simply if your child has that special educational need and may require the extra support that need brings, then you have the right to assessment. So don't let anyone tell you anything other than that. And at the end of the day, if you apply and you don't get one, at least you've tried. But actually, most people who don't get one do manage to overturn them. So I'd really go for it. Again, school doesn't have funding, and we hear this a lot. And actually, they don't. They really don't. But the fact is they have to. So schools are provided with around £4,000 for every child. And they used to, a long time back, every child who had an EHCP, they could get up to £6,000 extra per child. But what was happening was schools were kind of over applying for EHCPs because, of course, it would bring in more money. So even children maybe who could have been managed with in-school support were actually, they were applying for EHCPs, and it was costing the local authorities too much money. Children at special schools is £10,000, which is, as you can see, before. However, the schools are given a block of money to spend on children with SEND, and sadly, that block of money is not calculated by how many children they have with SEND. It's calculated by a whole very complex kind of set of figures, which are to do with what areas the school in. Is it an area of deprivation? What the employment rate is, what the English as a second language rate is. It's determined by all sorts of things, none of which necessarily relate to how many children have additional needs. So some schools are really struggling, and you can kind of understand that they're thinking, oh no, we've got this child, they're going to have an EHCP, we're going to have to provide all these things for them. We just don't have the money and staff to do it. But at the end of the day, that's an argument between them and their local authority, your local authority, not between you and them. So it's always worth applying. For children who have really a high level of need, there is actually additional funding they can apply for over the £6,000. So for children who have no sight, who are Braille users, they will often get some additional funding on top of that. For children with vision impairment and additional needs, the school can apply to the local authority. If the local authority have got the money, they will be able to support the school. But as we also know, we've got lots of local authorities who are facing bankruptcy, and the whole thing's quite complicated. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for it. This is what Lynn said. You don't have to complete an application form if you're somebody who it's very busy, you're working full time, you've got 4 other children, you find forms difficult, whatever reason, you can just write a letter. You really do not have, you can write a letter by hand if you need, you don't have to fill out a form. Don't let them put you off by doing that. This is a really complicated one. You cannot have an EHCP and its associated funding if your child is at a private school. It's very unlikely you're very unlikely for your child to get the funding that comes with an EHCP. They can certainly have an EHCP, but the school wouldn't get the extra funding. But they can apply for top-up funding. However, if you can prove that that private school is really the only place that meet your child's needs, and it's difficult to prove it, but there are exceptions, then you can. So it's not a complete no, but you know, it is something that's unlikely. And I think, like I say, I think that's the last myth I wanted to bust. And we will go into far more detail about how you know what to do if you do apply for an assessment and you're turned down, or if you do get assessed and then your child is turned down for an EHCP in the third of these, which I think is going to be sometime later in November. And we'll go into that in more detail. So I'm going to hand you back to Lynn now, if that's okay, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you.